Well, Garry, it's great to see you in person. Thanks for having us at Demo Day.
Oh, thanks so much for coming out.
And it happens to be the 20th anniversary of YC being founded, so extra special week to be able to talk to you.
Yeah, such a pleasure.
And so, okay, $800 billion in market value created is sort of what you tweeted this week. Some of the biggest names in tech have come out of YC. Can you talk a little bit about the strategy and that formula that you look for to pick some of these winners?
Yeah, I mean, some of the biggest ones in the world were Airbnb, Coinbase, DoorDash. These are companies that now are household names, but each and every one applied on a website, ycombinator.com/apply. It's pretty crazy that you can go to a website, fill out what you want to build, and it's really technical people who want to change the world, and they fill out those 12 questions, and we read, and within basically a matter of weeks, we'll give someone $500,000. And so it did not start that way. Paul Graham and Jessica Livingston started that in 2005, giving $12,000 or $15,000. But the first sort of unicorn that came out was Dropbox, now a public company, now a household name also, and Airbnb, which about $15,000 became worth more than $2 billion. At the IPO, which is pretty crazy. So it's 20 years of trying to help people right when there are 2 or 3 people just starting out, and it's been working really well.
Thinking back and sort of the muscle memory of looking at the applications that ended up being those winners, are there consistent themes or traits that the founders have? What would you say separates those big winners?
I guess, unsurprisingly, one of the bigger things is that they're very, very technical. And this is sort of lost to the sands of time. Today, people think, well, if you're a technical CEO like a Mark Zuckerberg, of course they're going to go and create companies worth, hundreds of billions of dollars. But that wasn't true when they first started. And even today, it's sometimes easy to forget. Like the people who are going to build the future around us, they're also sort of best suited to be founder CEO for the long haul, and those founder CEOs end up creating incredible companies that are just better.
And you yourself are a YC alumni. So 2008, you've lived through some big tech cycles. Can you talk a little bit about the evolution of the fund? Obviously, it's gotten bigger. You talked about the dollar amount, but kind of bring us through the changes that YC has gone through over the past couple of decades.
Yeah, I think the biggest interesting thing about it is Paul and Jessica started YC just to help people like themselves, but they even thought maybe this is just for summer founders right out of school. Like they didn't think that they would get even maybe new grads or people who had worked at startups already. They said, how do we teach students how to do this? But I think that was sort of the surprise. If you're very technical and you're very ambitious, those do now turn out to be the absolute best people to start companies.
And I think about sort of the cloud era, you had mobile in there, crypto is a big moment. How have the returns differed through those different vintages and sort of eras of tech?
I mean, I guess the wild thing about YC is that it's been sort of the bulwark of the best returns for venture capital broadly. Like you could go to any venture capital firm, even on the East Coast in New York, but definitely Sand Hill Road, and you'll find that YC companies are the companies that they tout on their homepage, and so that's always been perennial. And for each wave, I think that the commonality is that it's young technical founders who are very ambitious who start them. So for us, we're actually totally generalist. We funded Coinbase not because we had some sort of specific thesis about Bitcoin or the Satoshi Nakamoto white paper. It was because someone in our community had read the white paper and said, I'm going to go do that. And we said, well, this founder, Brian Armstrong, who today I argue is one of the best CEOs in all of cryptocurrency, that was the right person to start that company at that time.
It feels like YC is sort of the stamp of approval. It's almost like you've kind of earned it. You've almost gotten your MBA if you're a YC founder. What has that meant in Silicon Valley when founders graduate and kind of go on to do their next thing?
I think it's actually been an interesting double-edged sword. Like YC for the first 10 years was not sort of this credential. And it's something that we're pretty worried about. Like, we actually don't necessarily want it to be a credential, but we do want it to be a community that attracts all the best builders. So I guess we're trying to figure that out, right? Like, YC didn't need to be a credential to be successful, and sometimes we worry being a credential will actually attract the wrong kind of people who are more interested in fame and fortune than the most important thing to us, which is making something people want.
How do you separate that at the early stages, knowing who's sort of chasing that credential versus really building something valuable?
I mean, my favorite thing about the sort of 12-question application process is actually trying the demo. So being able to look at, was this well thought out? Who is this for? Is there like a theory of mind about what this product is, what problem it solves, and for who? And how severe is that problem? And people who are really earnest and people who really want to solve that problem, not just get rich or become famous. That really comes out, whether it's the 10-minute interview or really looking at the quality of the product they make.
Have you seen examples of that where you accept a founder and pretty soon after say, ooh, all right, this is the wrong person, or they're in it for the wrong reasons?
I mean, we see both kinds. The part that really gets me excited is I remember meeting Apoorva Mehta of Instacart. He actually created Instacart, basically ready to go, both the driver app and the app that allowed you to buy groceries. And when I saw that, one of my favorite things about it was, this was right at the dawn of new apps for mobile phones. So I could see how he built the app for buying groceries, and it was properly threaded. Like, you scrolled and it scrolled very cleanly and quickly. And that was unusual for that moment in 2012 when he started that company. So we can really sort of tell, is this person a great builder? It's like a craftsperson.
Interesting. And that early on that you could see how technically well built it was. You talked a little bit about sort of the early days of YC. The venture landscape has changed so much too. There's a lot of sort of copycats out there, a lot more incubators, a lot more capital in private markets. How are you managing the competition and making sure that YC is still relevant in this new era?
Yeah, I mean, some of it is like anything that helps founders is a great thing. It's actually kind of odd that there aren't more that have turned in the kind of results that YC has. We sort of hope there will be, actually. I guess on the flip side, we really just think that as YC grows, there's this crazy network effect. And so we want that. We want it to be the biggest and the best and the most powerful community and network. But at the same time, the thing that's been top of my mind is how do we make sure that people know, when you come to do Y Combinator, you get very personalized attention from a YC partner who picked you out of all the different founders and startups that they could have funded. And you really do have a partner, and I'm one of those partners. I've been funding companies since I came back to YC. And you won't get like sort of lost in the crowd. That's sort of the biggest criticism that some of the new upstarts level at us. But I think it's pretty unfair because we spend a lot of time trying to help people just one-on-one. You get super personalized advice.
And do you feel like there's more specialists out there too? Is that a criticism or a reason that folks might not want to go to YC to say, no, I really want someone who's specialized in my industry?
Well, I guess one thing that we are used to is about 20 to 30% of the companies during YC change their idea and sometimes their industry entirely. And if you end up with an incubator that is very specialized, you might not be able to change into the thing that you were supposed to. I will say that there are incredible investors who are going to be right outside these doors at demo day, and they specialize at seed or at the A, and we pair with them really, really well.
Is there a little bit of chasing of sort of the YC cohorts? I would think other investors that we've talked to too that are kind of hanging outside, looking for the best founders. What have you seen in terms of other investors sort of piling onto YC companies?
Well, I guess the wildest thing that we've seen is sometimes the hottest company is not the best. And there are lots of examples, even thinking of Brian Armstrong at Coinbase. When he did demo day, he actually only raised half as much as he wanted to. It was not a hot startup, but that was by far the best company to invest in for that cohort. And he was sitting there in the corner without so many people rushing after him. So I think that that's actually the exciting thing about investing. Like if people think that the most popular startup is the one that's going to be huge, that's just not how it works.
That's a great example of Brian Armstrong. It's hard to picture that now, right?
Yeah, it's wild. But that's sort of the crazy thing that we see every year. Like about 5 to 12% of any given batch will go on to become worth $1 billion or more. And about a quarter of those end up becoming decacorns. So these are truly the names that go on to be the top fund returner, the thing that is like the best startup of that generation. And I'm just excited. Like the energy right outside this room is pretty palpable.
We'll talk a little bit about Demo Day. I want to hear more about how it works. But while we're talking about sort of YC and the history, have the returns been as good? We talk about some of the winners. You've got Stripe, you've got Coinbase, Dropbox. I mean, a whole list of companies. Have they been as consistently good throughout the later vintages?
Yeah, the last sort of 5 or 6 years, my sense is the number of unicorns has actually only gone up. Sort of 10 or so years ago, that number was around 2 to 3%. So, if the numbers truly hold up at 6 to 12%, we think that the network effects and the advantages of doing YC have only become more bold. And also, we're in the middle of the age of intelligence, which is pretty wild. Like, you literally can buy GPUs and write software, and you can do knowledge work. And that's really changing the way revenue is growing inside these startups.
How are you advising startups through what is a pretty different backdrop, even from 5 years ago, with a changing rate environment? It seems to, in some cases, be harder to raise money. What's been your advice to founders?
Yeah, do you remember in the HBO show Silicon Valley, they would say, oh, you shouldn't try to get revenue. You could be a pure play. I think all of that stuff has gone out the window, especially of late. And that's a really good thing for founders because you can make a piece of software. Often it's built on large language models. It can do knowledge work, and we're seeing companies grow 10% week on week. And that was sort of the gold standard when Airbnb went through YC in 2009. They put that on their bathroom window every morning, and they stared at that. Like, how do we grow 10% week on week? And they did it. And of course, they became a generational company. The wild thing now is for about the last 9 months, the whole batch, the whole YC batch in aggregate, on average, grow 10% per week. So not just like the number 1 or number 2 company out of a cohort of 30 or 50 or 100. Literally, the whole batch in aggregate is growing revenue by 10% week on week. And that's never happened before. So this is actually really good. Like, capital, you don't have to raise as much. The capital goes much longer. I mean, the wild thing is people are getting to $1 million to $10 million a year revenue with under 10 people. And that's really never happened before in early stage venture.
What do you attribute that to? Is that this AI moment that we're in? It's easier to build, then companies can be leaner?
That's right. I mean, one of the things that we're really excited about, in fact, all of the YC partners, all of us are technical, but obviously we maybe stopped along the way, but a number of us have picked up vibe coding again. You should ask Tom about this, actually.
Wait, explain what vibe coding is for a second.
So Andrej Karpathy is sort of one of the luminaries of AI research, and he makes these amazing multi-hour tutorials on YouTube about machine learning and large language models. But what he pointed out recently is that you can just talk to the large language models, and they will code entire apps. And if there's a bug, or if you want it to change, or you want it to look a different way, you don't have to go in there and write the code yourself. You don't have to hire someone to do it. You just talk directly to the large language model that wrote it, and it'll fix it for you. And sometimes you could just accept all changes without even looking at the changes it made, because it's that good now. So this is the first time that's ever happened. And about 25% of the batch, 95% of their code was written by large language models. And so that sounds a little scary, but on the other hand, what that means for founders is that you don't need a team of 50 or 100 engineers. You can just have a team of 10, and that team of 10 today, when they are fully vibe coders, when they are actually really, really good at using the cutting edge tools for code gen today, like Cursor or Windsurf, they will literally do the work of 10 or 100 engineers in the course of a single day.
Does that change the way you think about some of the applications too? If someone's actually not as technical and they can lean on vibe coding, does that make them a better suit for being a founder? Whereas 5 years ago, they probably wouldn't have even been able to figure that out or get in the door?
Well, I think it makes it a lot easier. It makes it easier for people who do have technical co-founders, and we see that pair all the time. I think the other thing that it's going to do in the industry is that there are all these pieces of software that normally you could never write software for, like industries that before people would say, oh, it's too small a market. But all of those things now can support $100 million a year businesses that are run by 10 people. And so this is really the good news. It's happening at actually a kind of perfect time, because I think there's a lot of anxiety in the job market, especially from young software engineers coming into the market. And for them, I would say, you should vibe code. Like, you should go find a product or area of the pie of GDP where there's no software. And if you can go in there and understand what those people need, well, they're going to pay you. And maybe it's that engineer who couldn't get a job at Meta or Google who actually can build a standalone business making $10 or $100 million a year with 10 people. Like, that's such a powerful moment in software. And I think all of venture and startups are really going to change from here.
That's so, in some ways, counterintuitive, because some of the big tech companies, I would think the jobs that people probably really want out of Stanford, like you said, they might not be hiring at the level they were, but you're saying it's actually a bigger opportunity.
Yeah, you don't have to prove your worth by going to work at big tech. You should just go and build technology and software that solves real problems for people. And maybe the hardest part is actually finding that thing that you uniquely should go and do.
That's fascinating. It's great to get your perspective on that. Let's talk about the cohort today and what people are going to see on stage. I would think AI is probably a big theme, but can you give us a flavor of sort of who's in this batch?
Yeah, absolutely. About 81% are AI startups, classically. That's not a surprise. That wasn't an intentional thing where we're going out and just selecting that. It's actually smart engineers are just choosing that because that's the thing that will allow them to build businesses of great value. About 11% are actually hard tech and hardware. So out there in the hardware hall, you're going to see things like practical robots that can actually refurbish laptops all autonomously. And any kind of laptop. In the past, if you tried to do something like this, it would only work on just MacBook Pros, and you'd have to write a lot of software to make it work just for that. But this one can do any kind of laptop, anytime, which has never happened before, and it's built on open source, built on sort of the latest innovations in AI and robotics.
How are you evaluating some of the hype in AI versus what's actually investable? Are you able to differentiate, or is it too early?
I mean, there's a ton of hype, but what's unique about this moment is that people are actually getting commercial validation. And so, almost everyone in there, if you're an investor at Demo Day, you'll be able to call a real customer, and that person will say, yeah, we use this software every single day. And I have 3 people in my back office, and they were doing this very rote thing. I have them working on this other thing that is 10 times more valuable for me. And that's sort of the story that we're hearing over and over again.
Is it harder for those who are not in AI? Are they sort of being left on the sidelines, and are the AI companies sort of taking all the oxygen out of the room?
I mean, the thing is, it's not hard to add. It's really, literally one API call. And when it comes to software, I guess almost every single company is using the large language models to actually code their software. And on the flip side, there's almost always something that is a human process, something that is rote or boring, or something that is time-consuming and error-prone, that now large language models can just do. These agents are not, 80 IQ things. They are, sort of arguably close to 125, 130 IQ. They can do almost any knowledge work, which is a pretty wild moment.
Is there any anxiety among some of the startups that OpenAI or Anthropic are just going to add on what they do as a feature?
Yeah, absolutely. But at the same time, I think there's a sort of natural boundary, just as Google didn't go and do what Airbnb does. There are just going to be verticals and vertical software spaces that will be untouched, and I think that that's really good news. On the flip side, like for a while, we were pretty worried that some of the AI model companies were actually going to get a form of monopoly, similar to the Windows monopoly or the browser monopolies that are sort of still existent. And the good news is there are maybe 8, maybe 9 labs. There are new labs coming on that are all competing. And so to me, competition is the best possible thing for sort of very vibrant markets, and markets will serve consumers 10 or 100 times better than monopolies.
And that's interesting. So it's not too late to create a competing lab or large language model. I just think of how far ahead and how much money OpenAI has raised.
Yeah, the interesting thing about AI and models in particular is that obviously there's been untold amounts of money going into language models and now multimodal models. But those other modalities, they're actually pretty underinvested. Like image diffusion models, for instance, are nobody has spent that much money on that yet, but there are really great examples of that coming. I mean, Midjourney is sort of the best one out there, but there are many other companies like Playground that are going to come along and create much better models.
And what about the cost of capital? I mean, the total that they need to raise, has that changed for those model companies, or is it coming down now that seems to be getting cheaper? I don't know if you need to raise as much as some have at this point.
Well, I mean, for vertical SaaS companies, you need way less money because what you're doing is, all of the moats are actually in building prompts and evals to make the large language models do the work you need. But I think for the AI model companies, they need more money than ever. And so, and that's really because of the scaling law. That's why companies like Scale AI are continuing to scale their own revenue, in that what we think is like the scaling law is driving model investment across the board. And the two things you really need are data and you need compute. And that explains a lot about NVIDIA as well.
What do you make of the commodity argument that these large language models are becoming commodities?
Well, I think Satya Nadella is right. I think there is this thing called Jevons paradox, where once you make once you make something like compute cheap enough, or AI creating intelligence that is so cheap, it actually increases the demand. And so, right now, a lot of NVIDIA stock price might be driven by needs of AI labs to train ever bigger models. But as those models become much more powerful, then the desire and the demand for compute to run those models, inference, is going to go up 10 or 100x. And what we hope is that will actually usher into this sort of new age of abundance. Like, can you imagine robots actually, practical robots doing real things in your home? Can you think of all of the different, sort of rote things and rote tasks that, day to day we have to figure out, here's this bill, or I have to deal with the city in this way. But, an AI agent that knows you and knows what you want could just go do that thing, and it could get on the phone and take care of it for you. Like, these are things that are right around the corner, and that's how, inference demand will go up 10 or 100x.
It's really interesting to get your take on that. Sam Altman, of course, is another YC alum and sort of in this network. Do you still stay in touch with him throughout all the OpenAI
Absolutely.
craziness?
Yeah, I mean, he was sitting in my seat, 8 years ago, which is pretty wild.
What advice has he given you, or did he give you when he was passing the baton?
Well, I mean, I think that he is going to continue to pursue consumer scenarios, and I think ChatGPT is one of the most amazing new consumer brands to come out in the last 10 years, certainly one of the fastest to grow. And he also has walked in front of our, he's come out to our community and said, if you're going to compete with ChatGPT, maybe don't, but if you're going to make vertical software, like we have APIs for you, and that's a great thing to me. I think that that is actually the opportunity we really, really want to continue to grow. And what I want to happen is for there to be 1,000 unicorns every single year. That would be a great outcome of YC over the next 10 years.
Have you given him any advice through some of the turmoil, whether it's the CEO ouster and him coming back and Elon? Have you been able to sort of mentor him in response?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, some of it is, I think he's been on his journey. I think the events of the last couple of years have been really sobering, but I think that he's one of the most sort of forward-thinking people I've ever met, and really a force of nature. So if you look at how Paul Graham talks about him, I really see it. I think that there's something there, and I'm really thankful for it, frankly. Like, I think that the age of intelligence was going to happen, but it was going to be locked away inside of Google for another decade, and instead we're living on this timeline that is much more accelerated.
And you're seeing the benefits, like you said, with your startups already.
Yeah, and I think that that's, anything that helps founders achieve their dreams, that's what I'm here for.
So IPO market. I mean, we're talking during a week when it's been incredibly volatile. The NASDAQ was down 4 or 5%. Is that market volatility affecting the mindset of some of the companies you work with and how they think about eventually being public companies?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I guess the great thing, though, is private markets still exist, and if you've got a business that is growing, even 50% a year at hundreds of millions of dollars in real revenue, you have net dollar retention of 100% or more, there's capital for that, and those are sort of the fast-growing startups that will do well in a bad market or a good market. So I guess startup land is not that worried right now.
Has that changed from the early days? Is an IPO seen as less of a milestone and less of a moment than it was maybe even a decade ago?
I think that ultimately founders are going to continue to want to get to IPO, and it's a really important milestone. I don't think IPOs are going away anytime. From our community, I think people are very excited about doing direct listings because of really a lot of the benefits around it. But either way, I think that that's still viewed as the brass ring.
Are there going to be more sort of forever private companies? I think of Stripe, and it seems like there's always, every year, it's like, this is the year that Stripe's going to go public. I mean, there's SpaceX, there's all of these big examples. Are there going to be more that just totally decide, hey, it's not for me, I'm not going to go public?
I think it's entirely possible. Maybe like the extreme outlier companies that are operating on, not a 5-year time frame, but like a 50-year time frame. As long as I think the capital markets are going to be there for those companies, and people who invest along the way can get out on secondary almost any time. So it wouldn't surprise me if that also persisted. I think having to if you don't have to IPO, often people just don't.
Especially in a moment like this,
That's
when
right.
It's a little scary, I would think, to try to list at least on a week like this.
Yeah.
Super interesting. We should talk about San Francisco.
Oh, yeah.
You've been really involved, especially on a very local level. What have you seen in the past? Gosh, when was Lurie elected?
Yeah, just last year, yeah.
Very recently. Have you seen any changes that give you hope, even more hope in San Francisco?
Yeah, I see that the police commission is turning. These are sort of, not to be all the way in the weeds, but I think having Brooke Jenkins as DA, that was a huge step. Lurie spending a lot of time and attention on fully staffing the police and sort of undoing what the police commission did to the police, sort of the rank and file. I think these are sort of the basic pieces of really great governance that we're starting to see from that administration. And so I think that San Francisco for a long time, especially with tech people not paying attention, we allowed a doom loop to occur. No housing, unsafe streets, ever spiraling schools. And I'm proud to say, I think that we're on the mend, but the work is not done. I think it's another 5 or 10 years. We're discovering that even with a great district attorney who's willing to charge repeat offenders who have 50 or 100 offenses, repeat back to back, some of the judges in the Superior Court probably need to be replaced in the next elections, and we failed to do that in recent elections. So, I'm heartened, but also the job is far from done. I think we're just seeing the initial good news happening, but it's going to be a 10-year process. But when it does, San Francisco is the place where the smartest people from around the world want to be here, and for good reason. It's 2.5 times more likely that someone who bases their company in the San Francisco Bay Area will create a unicorn startup in our community. And so, for the future's sake, I actually really hope that we can truly fix San Francisco and create this boom loop, because I think the dividends will be accrued to the whole world.
How important are these AI startups for the boom loop?
Super important. I mean, I think ultimately, I think when you look at San Francisco, you sort of have a resource trap, because there is so much tax revenue. If we do not pay attention to governance, where the money goes, which nonprofits and which policies, and whether or not there's state capacity, if we don't pay attention, then all of it is wasted, and in fact, a doom loop happens. And I think that it's up to us to turn that into the boom loop by paying attention to the policies and making sure we have as much abundance as possible from sort of the capitalist side, like we can actually create a lot of prosperity. And then, I'm not against taxes. I'm just against the taxes that go to things that don't serve the people. And I think that this is something that we, San Francisco can become a model for the rest of the nation to show, hey, like, things can get a little bit out of control, but if we pay attention to our local, then we can actually affect things both at the state level and nationally. It all starts locally.
Have you noticed founders and companies moving back?
Oh yes, definitely. I mean, it's a whole wave of people realizing we're in the middle of the revolution and I need to be in Cerebral Valley, which is what they call Hayes Valley these days.
Yeah, that's become a hotspot, even the dog patch and sort of areas of really intense AI competition and startups.
Yeah, I think one thing that is easy to miss, but living in San Francisco, people sort of lose the sense, what is special about this place? It's actually, if you come here from Europe, if you come here from Asia, if you come here from Africa, you come here from anywhere else in the world, the things that people are talking about in the cafes, the aspirations of the people that you're going to run across, it's just that much bigger. Like, they really believe that the technology that we build can actually solve real problems. And that is rare, actually.
So final bonus question, the best advice that you've gotten throughout the decades at YC, can you remember anything that really stuck with you?
I think I would go with, I am very lucky to have Brian Chesky on my board at YC, and even before he and Paul Graham coined the term founder mode, that's sort of the thing that he told me that I really need to think about when coming back to YC. Think about it as, what do you want, and what are the things that you need to do to go and create those things, and if you need to, like, you're going to have to act as a founder again. So I'm not the founder of YC, but I've definitely been inspired by Brian Chesky to try to bring that energy. And I'm really excited to be here. I mean, it's just, I wake up in the morning and can't believe I get to do this as a job, especially because we get to see thousands of people every single year try to create the companies that all of us know and love.
I expect we'll hear a lot more about founder mode on stage today. Garry, this is fascinating. It's such a treat to get to hear your perspective on all of these different topics. So thanks for your time today.
Thanks for having me.